Most motorcycle failures aren't caused by broken parts, but by fluids that quietly degrade over time. In a global system where motorcycles support daily work, mobility, and entire economies, neglecting these basics has real consequences. By the end of this video, you'll understand every essential motorcycle fluid, the warning signs riders usually miss, and how simple, well-timed maintenance decisions protect reliability, safety, and long-term cost. And understanding the invisible role every fluid plays is only the first step. The foundation of every motorcycle's reliability and the starting point for your maintenance routine begins with engine oil. Engine oil is not glamorous, and it never asks to be admired. It earns its place by showing up first and leaving last. Before a piston ever rises, before a valve ever opens, oil is already moving through hidden corridors, slipping between surfaces that were never meant to touch. It forms a living barrier that keeps metal from clawing at metal, draws heat away from stressed internals, traps contamination, and seals tolerances so tight they exist beyond sight. Every mile begins here, whether the rider realizes it or not. A motorcycle, however, does not treat oil gently. Unlike most cars, many bikes demand one fluid to serve three masters at once. That same oil must protect the engine's rotating mass, survive the violence of transmission gears, and manage the friction of a wet clutch that engages and disengages thousands of times. This is why motorcycle-specific oil matters. It is engineered to endure shear forces, resist thermal collapse, and maintain clutch engagement without glazing or slip. Using automotive oil rarely causes immediate catastrophe. What it does instead is more dangerous. It dulls response. It softens protection. It shortens the engine's honest lifespan, one quiet ride at a time. As miles accumulate, oil slowly loses its edge. Heat cycles weaken its structure. Mechanical stress tears at its resilience. Combustion residue clouds its clarity. Fine metallic particles ride along, unseen, carried through passages that once flowed clean. The engine keeps running, which is what makes neglect so tempting. There is no dramatic warning, no sharp reminder, just the illusion that everything is fine. When oil is ignored, the first casualties are always invisible. Cam surfaces surrender their hardness, bearing clearances widen, rings lose their seal. None of this announces itself from the saddle. By the time a noise appears or performance fades, the damage has already settled in. Trust between machine and rider erodes quietly, long before it breaks. Changing engine oil is not a chore. It is an act of respect. It is the simplest way to repay an engine for every cold morning start, every long highway pull, every hour spent turning fuel into motion. This single ritual preserves smoothness, keeps power honest, and protects reliability across years rather than seasons. That is why oil stands at the foundation. Every other service depends on it doing its job first. If this breakdown shows how engine oil forms the foundation of a reliable maintenance routine, then hit like, drop a hype, and subscribe. It helps us continue creating clear guides and reach riders who want to stay safe on the road. Engine oil is, without question, the first maintenance ritual every rider learns, but it only manages heat inside the engine. What truly decides whether that heat becomes controlled or destructive is something flowing just beyond the cylinders. And that responsibility belongs to coolant. Modern motorcycles do not rely on coolant for convenience. They depend on it for survival. Engines today are denser, more powerful, and built with tolerances so tight that excess temperature has nowhere to hide. Power is expected on cold mornings, in gridlock traffic, at elevation, and across long summer stretches of asphalt. Air alone cannot manage that demand. Coolant exists to do what airflow cannot. Keep the engine stable, composed, and predictable, no matter the conditions surrounding it. Inside a liquid-cooled engine, coolant travels through hidden jackets wrapped around cylinders in the head, absorbing thermal energy before it can concentrate and cause harm. That heated fluid then flows forward to the radiator, where it sheds energy safely into the atmosphere before starting the cycle again. The goal is not to keep the engine cold. It is to keep temperatures balanced. Consistency, not extremes, is what protects modern components. The advantage over air-cooled designs becomes obvious the moment movement slows. An air-cooled engine depends on speed and airflow to regulate itself. Take away forward motion and temperatures climb. A liquid-cooled engine has no such weakness. Whether the bike is idling in traffic, inching up a steep grade, or crawling through a construction zone on a humid afternoon, coolant continues circulating. It becomes the engine's circulatory system, keeping stress from pooling in any one place. Temperature control is only half of coolant's responsibility. It also shields internal surfaces from corrosion and chemical attack. Aluminum castings, steel fasteners, rubber seals, and composite gaskets all share the same hostile environment. Proper coolant contains inhibitors that prevent rust, reduce electrolysis, and protect sealing surfaces from slow decay. As coolant ages, those defenses fade, even if the odometer barely moves. That is where neglect becomes dangerous. Coolant does not fail loudly. Additives break down with time. Moisture content rises. Incompatible mixtures can react, forming sludge that restricts flow and weakens heat transfer. The motorcycle may feel fine for months. Then one afternoon, stopped at a light or idling after a hard run, the temperature needle climbs faster than expected. Overheating rarely arrives as a dramatic moment. It creeps in through compromised circulation and exhausted protection. Just like blood pressure in the human body, balance matters more than extremes. When circulation weakens, endurance disappears. Cooling keeps the engine alive, but survival alone is not enough. Once the motorcycle is moving safely, the next responsibility is control. And nothing defines control more than the moment you need to stop. That is where brake fluid quietly takes over. Brake fluid exists to do one thing, and it must do it without hesitation. The instant a rider tightens the lever or presses the pedal, force must travel forward with absolute clarity. Nothing mechanical is touching yet. What moves first is pressure, carried through narrow lines by fluid that cannot afford delay, flex, or confusion. In that moment, stopping becomes a conversation between human intent and machine response, spoken entirely through hydraulics. Unlike oil or coolant, brake fluid has no secondary job. It does not cushion parts or regulate temperature. Its strength comes from resistance. Healthy brake fluid refuses to compress. That refusal is what gives a lever its firm edge and a pedal its reassuring weight. Pressure goes in, stopping power comes out. No translation required. This directness is where confidence is born, especially when speed is high and decisions are measured in heartbeats. The threat arrives quietly. Brake fluid is hygroscopic by nature, meaning it absorbs moisture from the surrounding air over time. This happens even in systems that appear sealed and untouched. Mileage does not matter here. Calendar time does. As moisture accumulates, the fluid's boiling point drops. Under sustained braking, downhill runs, or sudden panic stops, heat builds fast. When compromised fluid overheats, it can partially vaporize. Vapor changes everything. Gas compresses, liquid does not. When compression enters a braking system, feel disappears. The lever travels farther than expected. The pedal feels spongy instead of solid. Response lags behind in tension. The motorcycle still slows, but certainty vanishes. That hesitation, even if brief, is where danger lives. One stop may feel acceptable, the next may feel uncertain. In a true emergency, that inconsistency can steal precious distance. Front and rear systems share the same vulnerability, even though they play different roles. The front brake carries the heaviest burden, providing the majority of stopping force and absorbing immense load. During deceleration, any degradation here is immediately noticeable. The rear brake contributes balance and composure, especially at low speeds or during slow maneuvers. When fluid in either circuit is neglected, harmony disappears. The motorcycle no longer responds as a unified system. Brake fluid rarely fails with drama. There is no warning light, no obvious sound, no sudden collapse. Instead, it erodes feel first. It replaces certainty with doubt, and doubt has no place in braking. Fresh brake fluid restores immediacy. Pressure transfers cleanly. Feedback becomes predictable. The rider knows exactly how much stopping power is available and when it will arrive. That reliability turns instinct into action when seconds matter most. If understanding engine oil, coolant, and brake fluid has made you remember the importance of routine maintenance, the responsibility each fluid carries, and the small mistakes that can quietly compromise safety, share your experience. What challenges have you faced while checking or replacing these fluids? Drop your story in the comments. Your experience is what makes this community truly valuable. Brake fluid is all about stopping power under pressure, but control does not end when you slow down. Between stopping and moving again lies another fluid. Many riders forget, one that decides how smoothly power is delivered back to the engine. That responsibility belongs to clutch fluid, which is exactly what we are looking at next. Not every motorcycle separates power the same way. Some rely on a simple steel cable, pulled tight by hand strength and returned by spring tension. Others use a hydraulic system, one that replaces stretch and friction with controlled pressure. When that system is healthy, the difference is unmistakable. Lever effort stays light, engagement feels measured. Response remains consistent, whether the engine is cold, heat-soaked, or crawling through traffic after a long ride. Clutch fluid operates in a narrow but essential role. When the lever is drawn in, fluid carries that movement through the line to the slave cylinder, nudging the clutch plates apart just enough to interrupt power. Nothing about this process is dramatic. It is all about accuracy. The condition of the fluid decides whether your hand movement translates into clean separation or vague delay. Fresh fluid delivers a precise handoff. Degraded fluid blurs the exchange. Hydraulic clutch systems share chemistry with braking systems, but their mission is entirely different. Both rely on incompressible pressure. Both absorb moisture as time passes. Yet brakes demand force, while clutches demand finesse. The clutch is not about stopping. It is about timing. It governs how smoothly power leaves and returns, how cleanly gears engage, and how confidently a rider can balance throttle against traction. This is why clutch fluid problems often hide in plain sight. The motorcycle still pulls away from a stop. Shifts still happen. Nothing fails outright. Instead, feel begins to wander. The engagement point moves closer to the bar, then farther away. The lever loses its snap-on release. Neutral becomes harder to find. Low-speed maneuvers require more thought than they should. Riding starts to feel slightly out of rhythm. Because there is no emergency moment to expose weakness, many riders adapt without realizing what has changed. They compensate with extra throttle. They slip the clutch longer than necessary. They accept jerkiness in traffic as normal. Over time, moisture inside the fluid begins working against the system. Internal surfaces corrode. Seals lose consistency. Pressure delivery becomes uneven. That unevenness shows up when precision matters most. On a hill start, hesitation creeps in. In tight parking lot turns, control feels earned rather than natural. Confidence erodes not through failure, but through friction, where smoothness should exist. The machine no longer feels like an extension of intent. Clutch feel is not a luxury. It is a form of communication. When fluid is fresh, timing becomes intuitive again. Engagement sharpens without becoming abrupt. The rider regains that quiet assurance that power will arrive exactly when requested, no sooner and no later. The engine generates motion. Cooling preserves it. Brakes control it. The clutch manages its delivery. Yet none of those systems touch the pavement directly. That responsibility belongs to the front suspension, where fork oil determines whether comfort and control remain partners or slowly drift apart. Fork oil may be the most misunderstood fluid on a motorcycle because it never announces itself. Riders see springs and assume suspension is about support. In truth, springs simply hold weight. Control comes from oil. It decides how quickly the front end compresses, how firmly it resists movement, and how calmly it settles back into position. Without that control, a fork is reduced to little more than a bouncing mechanism with no sense of restraint. Inside each fork leg, oil is forced through precisely sized passages and valves every time the suspension moves. That resistance is known as damping. It governs how sharply the front dives under braking, how smoothly it absorbs broken pavement, and how composed the bike remains when the road turns uneven. Fork oil does far more than lubricate internal parts. It regulates motion itself, shaping how the motorcycle reacts to every input and surface change. This fluid lives a hard life. Every ride subjects it to repeated compression cycles, rapid temperature changes, and constant mechanical shear. Over time, heat thins its structure. Motion tears at its viscosity. Microscopic particles from internal wear suspend within it. Even in a sealed system with no visible leaks, fork oil slowly loses the ability to control energy the way it once did. The rider usually senses the change long before identifying the cause. Braking feels less settled, with the front end dropping deeper than expected. Sharp bumps transmit harshness instead of being absorbed. Mid-corner stability feels vague, as though the tire is asking for guidance that never quite arrives. The motorcycle still functions, which is what makes the problem deceptive. Confidence fades without an obvious failure. Many riders misdiagnose these sensations. Tires take the blame. Brakes seem suspect. Riding skill gets questioned, the suspension, quietly out of balance, goes unnoticed. This confusion comes from misunderstanding roles. Springs define height and load capacity. Fork oil defines feedback, composure, and control. When the oil is tired, reactions arrive too late or too abruptly. The bike feels nervous instead of planted. Comfort and control are inseparable. When damping degrades, fatigue sets in sooner. Small corrections demand effort instead of instinct. What once felt smooth becomes work. That shift happens gradually, which is why fork oil service is often postponed until symptoms are impossible to ignore. Replacing fork oil is not about fixing a failure. It is about restoring equilibrium. Fresh oil brings back measured resistance, predictable recovery, and a front end that moves with intention rather than impulse. Riders are often surprised by how composed their motorcycle feels afterward, as if a layer of calm has returned. If learning about fork oil has reminded you of a ride where your suspension felt off or made you notice how control and comfort change over time, then share your experience with us in the comments. What sensations did you notice first? How did it affect your ride? Your stories not only help other riders learn, but also make this moment a shared lesson in real-world riding. Fork oil teaches a quiet lesson about control and balance, but once the motorcycle is stable, power still has to reach the ground. And the way that power travels, through chain or shaft, brings us to a form of lubrication. Many riders treat as routine, yet rarely understand fully. Every motorcycle creates energy the same way, but the journey that power takes to reach the rear tire is not universal. Between combustion and contact sits the final drive, the last translator of intent. This is where force becomes motion, and where attention determines whether that motion feels effortless or slowly begins to resist itself. For most motorcycles, that journey runs through a chain, exposed, efficient, and brutally honest. A chain lives its entire life in the open. Road grit clings to it, rain drives into it, heat bakes it. Every mile adds another layer of punishment. Chain lubrication is not about appearance or ritual. Its purpose is survival. Proper lube reduces friction between pins and rollers, protects bare metal from corrosion, and allows the chain to flex naturally as the suspension works beneath the rider. Unlike engine oil sealed inside a case, chain lubricant is temporary by design. It is flung outward by rotation, diluted by weather, and contaminated almost immediately. That is why chain care must be frequent, intentional, and never postponed. Ignore it, and the motorcycle speaks back quickly. The chain lengthens unevenly. Sprocket teeth sharpen into hooks. Throttle input loses its smooth response and replaces it with tension. Noise creeps in where silence once lived. What should feel fluid begins to feel strained, as if the motorcycle is working against itself. Chains demand more frequent attention than engines because they operate without shelter, carrying load with every revolution, much like joints that require regular care to remain healthy over time. Other motorcycles choose a quieter path. Shaft drive systems hide their work inside sealed housings, clean and composed, often misunderstood as maintenance-free, but sealed does not mean immune. Inside that casing, gears mesh under constant pressure, relying on a specific gear oil to manage heat and prevent metal from grinding against metal. Shaft drive, oil does not ask for frequent service, but when it is forgotten, the cost is steep. Old oil thins. Heat builds silently. Bearings wear unnoticed. And when failure finally announces itself, repair is neither simple nor cheap. The distinction is not about which system is superior. It is about responsibility. Chains ask for regular, lighter care. Shaft drives ask for occasional, essential service. Both reward consistency, both penalize neglect. Final drive, care is about respecting the final mile power travels. Energy does not simply arrive at the tire. It passes through alignment, friction, and lubrication. Honor that passage and the motorcycle remains composed, efficient, and dependable mile after mile. But movement begins much earlier, before the first gear even engages. Deep inside the engine, fuel quality decides how cleanly that power is born. And this is where additives enter the conversation, carefully and optionally. Fuel system additives exist for one reason: support. They are not cures, not rescues, and certainly not shortcuts. They are chemical tools designed to assist a healthy system under specific conditions. When used with intention, they work quietly in the background. When used blindly, they create confidence without control. At their best, fuel additives serve two clear roles. The first is cleaning. Over time, fuel leaves behind residue. Varnish forms, gum settles, carbon accumulates. These deposits develop slowly, especially on motorcycles that sit unused, experience short rides, or live on inconsistent fuel quality. Injector cleaners and carburetor detergents are designed to dissolve those layers, restoring proper spray patterns and smooth fuel delivery. The result is not dramatic power gains. It is consistency returning where it had quietly faded. The second role is preservation. Fuel stabilizers slow oxidation and resist breakdown during storage. This matters more today than it once did. Modern gasoline, especially blends containing ethanol, absorbs moisture from the air and degrades faster than older fuels ever did. Left untreated, it loses volatility, invites corrosion, and turns starting a motorcycle into a struggle. A stabilizer helps fuel remain usable during downtime, protecting internal passages and easing the engine back to life when riding resumes. Fuel problems rarely announce themselves loudly. They creep in, cold starts, take longer. Idle grows uneven. Throttle response hesitates just enough to feel wrong. Additives appeal because they promise action without disassembly, effort without commitment. That is also where misuse begins. Riders stack products, exceed recommended doses, or pour additives into tanks hoping to mask deeper problems. Old fuel, clogged filters, neglected maintenance habits cannot be fixed chemically. More additive does not equal better results. Excessive concentrations can damage seals, alter combustion behavior, or dislodge debris too quickly, sending it downstream where it creates new blockages. Some formulas are incompatible with catalytic converters. Others offer no benefit at all to motorcycles that are ridden regularly and fueled responsibly. That is why additives remain optional. They are situational tools, not routine requirements. They earn their place during extended storage, questionable fuel supply, or early signs of deposit buildup. They do not replace oil changes. They do not substitute for riding, and they do not excuse neglect. The emotion here is restraint, judgment over impulse, understanding over hope. Additives reward riders who know when to intervene and when to leave a healthy system alone. Fuel additives work at the start of the process, helping combustion remain clean and controlled. But beyond fuel and fire, another kind of protection quietly supports every movement of your motorcycle. It does not flow through lines or burn in cylinders. It lives at pivot points, bearings, and joints, silently determining whether motion stays smooth or gradually wears down. This is the responsibility of proper lubrication at grease points, which is exactly what we'll explore next. Grease represents a different philosophy of care. Unlike oil or coolant, it does not circulate, cool, or cleanse. It stays exactly where it is placed, forming a quiet barrier between metal surfaces that move under load. Its role is simple, yet critical. Prevent direct contact, reduce friction, and defend against moisture and corrosion in places where liquid lubrication would disappear almost instantly. On a motorcycle, the most important grease points are also the easiest to forget. Suspension linkages, swing arm pivots, and steering head bearings live deep within the chassis, hidden from casual inspection. Yet they carry enormous forces every time the motorcycle accelerates, brakes, or changes direction. These components do not spin freely like wheels. They move in small, controlled arcs while supporting constant pressure. That kind of motion demands presence, not flow. Grease belongs here because it stays. When grease degrades or washes away, failure begins invisibly. Bearings do not seize overnight. Resistance creeps in. Steering loses its natural center. The handlebars begin to feel heavy, then subtly uneven, then notchy. The motorcycle no longer falls into a corner with confidence or returns to straight ahead without guidance. Riders often describe this as a vague handling problem, something that feels wrong without offering an obvious cause. Suspension linkages follow the same pattern. Without proper lubrication, needle bearings wear, seals harden, and movement becomes stiff instead of compliant. Small imperfections in the road feel sharp. The rear of the motorcycle reacts abruptly. Traction becomes inconsistent. The bike feels unsettled, even though the shock and springs themselves may still be functioning exactly as designed. These issues persist because grease points offer no warnings. They do not drip onto the garage floor. They do not illuminate dashboard lights. They simply age in silence, slowly replacing smooth motion with resistance. Like human joints, alignment and lubrication matter more than raw strength. When joints lose freedom, the entire body compensates. When bearings run dry, the motorcycle adapts poorly, shifting stress where it does not belong. Smooth steering is not a luxury, it is trust made tangible. It means the motorcycle responds exactly as expected, without correction or hesitation. That confidence is not created at the handlebars. It is preserved deep inside the frame. Greasing these areas is preventive, not corrective. By the time symptoms appear, wear has already begun. Regular attention protects handling, stability, and long-term reliability in ways no fluid change alone can deliver. These contact points may never be visible, yet they quietly guard balance and direction. And when every fluid has been refreshed and every joint protected, one truth becomes unavoidable. Maintenance is not a checklist. It is a responsibility that shapes how safely and confidently a motorcycle carries a life forward. If following this complete guide has helped you see how every fluid and grease point affects reliability, safety, and control, then I am happy to let you know there are even more tips, tricks, and maintenance secrets you can explore to keep your motorcycle performing at its best. Just click the next video on your screen, hit that like button, drop a hype in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Let us explore more hidden maintenance rituals, PRO level adjustments, and the small details that make every ride smoother, safer, and more reliable.